In the twilight of a distant world, where two suns painted the sky in hues of molten gold and deep crimson, there existed a realm that defied the boundaries of human imagination. The planet, known as Zelora, was a tapestry of bioluminescent forests, crystalline mountains, and rivers that shimmered with liquid starlight. It was here, amidst this otherworldly beauty, that the story of an extraordinary bond between species would unfold, a tale that would ripple through time and space, touching hearts across galaxies. The year was 2147, a period when humanity had stretched its reach far beyond Earth's cradle, venturing into the vast unknown with both curiosity and ambition. Among these explorers was Captain Elara Voss, a seasoned warrior whose reputation preceded her across star systems. She was not merely a soldier but a guardian of peace, a negotiator of fragile alliances, and a protector of those who could not defend themselves. Her piercing green eyes carried the weight of countless battles, yet they also held a flicker of hope, a belief that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could prevail. Elara's journey to Zelora began under dire circumstances. A distress signal had pierced the silence of space, emanating from the planet's surface. The message was fragmented, spoken in a melodic language unfamiliar to human ears, but one word repeated itself like a haunting refrain: Astrea. Deciphering it as the name of Zelora's ruling family, the United Galactic Alliance dispatched Elara and her team to investigate. What they found upon arrival was a scene of devastation. Cities reduced to smoldering ruins, skies choked with ash, and survivors scattered like shadows among the wreckage. Amidst the chaos stood Princess Nixil, the last surviving heir of House Astrea. She was unlike any being Elara had ever encountered. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, shifting colors with every movement, as though she were made of stardust herself. Her elongated limbs ended in delicate webbed fingers, and her hair cascaded down her back in waves of silver threads that seemed alive, pulsating faintly with an inner light. Yet for all her ethereal beauty, Nixil bore the marks of immense suffering, her once brilliant form now marred by wounds that refused to heal, her luminous presence dimmed by pain and exhaustion. Nixil's voice, when she finally spoke, was soft yet resonant, carrying an ancient wisdom that belied her youthful appearance. Through a translator device, she explained the tragedy that had befallen her people. An alien faction known as the Krylos, driven by greed and conquest, had invaded Zelora, seeking to exploit its rare energy source, the celestial veins of pure cosmic energy embedded within the planet's core. The invasion had been swift and merciless, leaving no quarter for mercy or surrender. Nixil's family had perished defending their homeland, and now she alone remained to carry the burden of her people's legacy. As Elara listened, she felt something stir within her, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and an inexplicable connection to this wounded princess. There was a vulnerability in Nixil's gaze, a plea for help that transcended language and species. And so, without hesitation, Elara vowed to stand by her side, to fight not just for survival but for justice. Little did she know that this decision would set into motion events that would challenge everything she believed about life, sacrifice, and the ties that bind souls together, even across the stars. The battlefield was a cacophony of chaos and despair, a stark contrast to the serene beauty of Zelora's untouched landscapes. The air crackled with the energy of plasma weapons and the guttural roars of Krylos warriors, their armored forms lumbering through the smoke-filled ruins like mechanical beasts. Elara moved with precision, her combat instincts honed over years of warfare guiding her every step. Beside her, Nixil fought with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, her slender frame wielding a staff imbued with the same celestial energy that coursed through the planet's veins. Together, they carved a path through the enemy ranks, their movements synchronized despite their vastly different physiologies. It was during a lull in the fighting, as they sought refuge behind the crumbling remains of a temple, that Elara noticed the severity of Nixil's condition. The princess's luminous skin had grown pale, her radiant glow fading with each passing moment. Blood, thick and silvery, like liquid moonlight, seeped from wounds on her arms and torso, pooling at her feet. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, and her once vibrant eyes were clouded with pain. Elara knelt beside her, concern etched deeply into her features. "You're hurt," Elara said, her voice firm but tinged with urgency. "We need to get you out of here." Nixil shook her head weakly, her silver hair shimmering faintly as if protesting the effort. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant echoes of battle. "I cannot leave. Not while my people still suffer." Elara clenched her jaw, torn between admiration for Nixil's resolve and frustration at her stubbornness. "You won't be able to help anyone if you die here," she countered sharply. "Let me carry you to safety." But Nixil's response stopped her cold. "Even if I survive this day, Elara, I am dying. My body, it is rejecting the very essence of Zelora. Without the celestial veins to sustain me, I am little more than a shadow clinging to life." The words struck Elara like a physical blow. She stared at the princess, searching for some sign that this was a lie, a desperate attempt to inspire courage in her allies. But Nixil's expression was unwavering, her eyes filled with a quiet acceptance that made Elara's heart ache. For the first time since arriving on Zelora, she felt truly powerless. Before she could respond, the ground trembled beneath them, and the sound of approaching footsteps signaled the return of the Krylos. Elara instinctively raised her weapon, ready to defend them both, but Nixil placed a trembling hand on her arm. "Do not waste your strength on me," she murmured. "There is another way." "What are you talking about?" Elara demanded, her voice rising despite herself. "What can I possibly do?" Nixil hesitated, her gaze dropping to the pool of silvery blood at her feet. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost reverent. "You're kinda humans. Your blood is unique. It carries adaptability, resilience. If you were to give me your blood, it might stabilize mine, allow me to endure long enough to reclaim the celestial veins." Elara froze, her mind racing. The idea was preposterous, dangerous even. Cross-species transfusions were unheard of, fraught with risks that could kill them both. Yet, as she looked into Nixil's pleading eyes, she saw something else, a flicker of hope, fragile but undeniable. Could she really refuse? "I don't know if this will work," Elara said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But if it means saving you, and your people, I'll do it." Without waiting for a reply, she pulled a medkit from her belt and retrieved a syringe. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed the needle into her own arm, drawing a vial of crimson blood. She then turned to Nixil, who watched her with an expression of awe and gratitude. As Elara injected the blood into the princess's vein, she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, as though some invisible thread had connected them in that moment. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Nixil's breathing steadied, and the faintest trace of color returned to her cheeks. Her eyes widened in wonder, and she reached out to grasp Elara's hand. "It is working," she whispered, her voice stronger now. "Thank you, Elara. You have given me more than life. You have given me hope." But their reprieve was short-lived. The Krylos were closing in, their monstrous forms emerging from the smoke like specters of doom. Elara tightened her grip on her weapon, determination hardening her features. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain: she would protect Nixil with everything she had. As the initial shock of the battlefield faded into the relentless rhythm of combat, Elara found herself grappling with emotions that surged unpredictably, like the tides of a stormy sea. The act of giving her blood to Nixil had created an unspoken bond between them, a connection that transcended the barriers of species and culture. Each glance exchanged between them carried a weight of shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the sacrifices they were making for a cause greater than themselves. Nixil, rejuvenated yet still fragile, moved with renewed vigor, her staff weaving intricate patterns of light that danced around her like protective spirits. Her presence on the battlefield was transformative. Her very aura seemed to bolster the morale of the dwindling Zeloran resistance fighters. They rallied around her, inspired by her resilience and the mysterious human warrior who had become her shield and ally. Elara, meanwhile, fought with a ferocity that bordered on recklessness. Every blow she struck against the Krylos was fueled not only by duty but by a burgeoning sense of personal investment in Nixil's survival. The thought of losing her, after having given so much of herself, was unbearable. This emotional entanglement complicated her usual tactical clarity, leading her to take risks she might otherwise avoid. Yet, paradoxically, it also heightened her senses, making her movements more instinctual and precise. Their partnership evolved organically, each learning from the other. Nixil taught Elara to harness the ambient energies of Zelora, showing her how to channel the planet's power through her weapons, enhancing their destructive capabilities. In return, Elara shared strategies of guerrilla warfare, teaching Nixil and her followers how to use the terrain to their advantage, striking swiftly and retreating before the Krylos could regroup. Despite these advancements, the toll of continuous conflict began to show. The nights were the hardest, when the adrenaline ebbed and reality set in. They would sit together under the fractured canopy of stars, the silence between them heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. It was during these quiet moments that their conversations deepened, moving beyond tactics and survival to touch on dreams and regrets. Nixil spoke of her childhood, of running through the luminescent forests of Zelora, her laughter echoing off the crystal trees. She described festivals where her people would dance under twin suns, celebrating the harmony between their world and the cosmos. These stories painted a vivid picture of a civilization rich in culture and spirit, now threatened by extinction. Ilara, in turn, opened up about her own past, sharing tales of Earth's blue skies and green fields, of family gatherings and simple joys. She spoke of her enlistment in the Galactic Alliance, driven by a desire to explore and protect, and of the friends she had lost along the way. These confessions wove a tapestry of mutual empathy and respect, strengthening their resolve to restore peace to Zelora. Yet, beneath these shared narratives lay an undercurrent of tension. The looming threat of the Krylos loomed large, a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. Each skirmish brought them closer to either victory or annihilation, and the pressure weighed heavily on both their shoulders. Moreover, the uncertainty of their alliance hung in the balance. While their bond grew stronger, the future remained shrouded in doubt. Would the Zylorans accept Ilara, a foreigner, as a savior? And what of Nixil's health? Was Ilara's blood truly a permanent solution, or merely a temporary reprieve? These questions gnawed at Ilara, keeping her awake long after Nixil had drifted into a restless sleep. She watched the princess, noting the subtle changes in her demeanor, the slight stiffening of her posture, the occasional grimace of pain. Despite the apparent success of the transfusion, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping through their fingers, that the window of opportunity was closing faster than they realized. And so, as dawn broke over the scarred landscape of Zelora, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Ilara and Nixil prepared for what promised to be their most decisive confrontation yet. The Krylos forces were massing for a final assault, intent on obliterating the remnants of resistance. With every fiber of her being, Ilara vowed to stand firm, to fight not just for survival but for the promise of a brighter tomorrow. For Nixil, for Zelora, and perhaps for herself. As the final battle loomed on the horizon, the atmosphere thickened with an electric tension that seemed to charge the very air around them. The remnants of the Zeloran resistance gathered in a hidden enclave nestled within the crystalline mountains, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and determination. Ilara stood at the forefront, her eyes scanning the rugged terrain, calculating every possible advantage they could leverage against the impending Krylos' onslaught. Beside her, Nixil radiated a quiet strength, her staff glowing softly, casting an ethereal light over the assembled warriors. The strategy was clear yet fraught with peril. They would utilize the natural labyrinth of the mountain caves to funnel the Krylos into narrow passages, where their superior numbers would become a liability. Ilara had trained the Zylorans in ambush tactics, teaching them to strike swiftly and retreat into the shadows, exploiting the element of surprise. Nixil, drawing upon her intimate knowledge of Zelora's geography, had identified key choke points where the Krylos' mechanized units would struggle to maneuver. Together, they had woven a plan that balanced brute force with cunning agility. Yet, as preparations intensified, Ilara couldn't ignore the growing unease gnawing at her gut. The Krylos were relentless, their technology advanced, and their commanders ruthless. Intelligence reports indicated that reinforcements were en route, swelling their ranks to overwhelming proportions. Time was slipping away, and with each passing hour, the odds tilted further against them. Nixil sensed Ilara's apprehension and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We have faced impossible odds before," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "And we have prevailed. Trust in our people, in our bond. We will find a way." Her words buoyed Ilara momentarily, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon her. She knew that this battle would demand more than skill and strategy. It would require sacrifice. The thought sent a chill down her spine, not because she feared death, but because she feared leaving Nixil behind. The princess had become more than an ally. She was a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience that inspired everyone around her. Losing her would mean losing the heart of their resistance. As night fell, casting the mountains in a veil of darkness, Elara and Nixil led their forces to their designated positions. The air was eerily silent, broken only by the distant rumble of the Krylos advancing. Elara checked her weapon one last time, ensuring it was primed and ready. Beside her, Nixil clutched her staff tightly, her knuckles white with tension. They exchanged a glance, unspoken promises passing between them. No matter what happened, they would face it together. The first wave of Krylos appeared at the mouth of the canyon, their hulking forms illuminated by the faint glow of their armor. Elara signaled for silence, her hand slicing through the air like a blade. The Zelorans melted into the shadows, becoming one with the rock and crystal. The Krylos marched forward, oblivious to the trap that awaited them. When the signal was given, chaos erupted. Bolts of energy and shards of crystal rained down upon the invaders, cutting through their ranks with devastating precision. The narrow confines amplified the impact of every strike, turning the canyon into a killing zone. The Krylos roared in fury, their weapons firing indiscriminately, but their size and numbers worked against them, causing confusion and disarray. Elara moved like a shadow, her movements fluid and lethal. She darted between cover, picking off Krylos soldiers with surgical accuracy. Nixil fought alongside her, her staff a blur of motion as it unleashed bursts of celestial energy that shattered armor and sent enemies sprawling. Together, they carved a path through the chaos, their synergy unmatched. But the tide began to shift. Reinforcements arrived, pouring into the canyon with terrifying speed. The Zelorans, though valiant, were outnumbered and exhausted. Elara watched as comrades fell, their cries echoing off the canyon walls. Her heart clenched with grief, but she pushed forward, refusing to yield. In the midst of the carnage, Nixil stumbled, her strength faltering. Elara caught her before she hit the ground, her eyes wide with alarm. "You need to rest," Elara urged, her voice urgent. "You're pushing yourself too hard." "I can't stop now," Nixil replied, her voice strained but resolute. "Not when we're so close." Elara hesitated, torn between protecting Nixil and continuing the fight. But then she saw it, a glimmer of opportunity. A small contingent of Krylos had broken through the lines, heading straight for the heart of the Resistance's command center. If they reached it, the battle would be lost. "Stay here," Elara commanded, her tone brooking no argument. "Hold this position. I'll deal with them." Nixil opened her mouth to protest, but Elara was already gone, sprinting toward the breach. Her mind raced, calculating angles and trajectories. She knew this was a suicide mission, but she also knew it was their only chance. As she disappeared into the fray, Nixil watched her go, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and pride. Alone in the chaos, Nixil drew upon every ounce of strength she had left. She raised her staff high, calling upon the ancient powers of Zelora. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and a surge of energy coursed through her veins. She would hold the line, no matter the cost. For Elara, for her people, for the future of their world. And so, as the battle raged on, two warriors fought with everything they had, their fates intertwined in a dance of desperation and defiance. The outcome remained uncertain, the scales of victory teetering precariously. But one thing was clear: whatever happened next, their bond would endure, forged in the crucible of war and tempered by the fires of sacrifice. The clash of energy and steel echoed through the canyon as Elara barreled toward the Krylos contingent threatening the command center. Her movements were a blur, each step calculated yet instinctual, her body operating on sheer willpower. The weight of the mission pressed down on her, but she pushed it aside, focusing only on the task at hand. She couldn't afford to falter, not now, not when so much depended on her. As she closed in on the enemy squad, Elara unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, her weapon roaring like a living thing. The Krylos turned to meet her assault, their bulky frames lumbering into position with surprising speed. Their weapons hummed ominously, bolts of searing energy lancing through the air. Elara dove behind a jagged outcrop of crystal just as one such bolt shattered the rock above her head, sending shards cascading down around her. She gritted her teeth and returned fire, taking down two of the Krylos before they could regroup. But there were too many. They advanced steadily, their numbers overwhelming her defenses. For every Krylos soldier she felled, another took its place, their relentless march unyielding. Ilara's ammunition dwindled rapidly, and panic began to creep into the edges of her mind. She glanced back toward where Nixil stood, holding the line against an endless tide of enemies. The princess was still fighting, her staff glowing brighter than ever, but even from this distance, Ilara could see the strain etched into her features. "No," Ilara muttered under her breath, shaking her head fiercely. "Not today." Summoning every ounce of strength, she hurled herself forward, abandoning cover in favor of aggressive offense. Her blade flashed in the dim light, slicing through armor and flesh alike. She fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, her strikes fueled by desperation and determination. The Krylos hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden shift in her tactics. It was all the opening she needed. One by one, they fell, until only a single Krylos commander remained, a towering figure clad in reinforced black armor, its visor glowing with an ominous red hue. It raised a massive energy cannon, aiming directly at Ilara. She froze for a fraction of a second, knowing she wouldn't be able to dodge in time. But then, something extraordinary happened. A wave of radiant energy surged past her, striking the Krylos commander with devastating force. Its armor cracked and splintered, the creature collapsing in a heap of smoking metal and charred flesh. Ilara spun around to see Nixil standing there, her staff blazing with an intensity that seemed almost otherworldly. Her silver hair billowed around her like a halo, and her eyes glowed with an inner fire. "I told you to stay put," Ilara said, her voice sharp but tinged with relief. "And I told you we face this together," Nixil replied, her tone firm despite the exhaustion evident in her stance. She stepped closer, her gaze locking onto Ilara's. "We are stronger united." For a moment, neither of them moved, the chaos of battle fading into the background as their connection deepened. Then, without another word, they turned back toward the fray, side by side once more. Together, they carved a path through the remaining Krylos forces, their combined strength turning the tide of the battle. Yet, victory came at a cost. As the last of the invaders fell, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The celestial veins, the source of Zelora's power, had been destabilized by the Krylos' relentless attacks. Cracks spread across the canyon floor, glowing with an eerie blue light as raw cosmic energy seeped upward. The very fabric of the planet seemed to be unraveling. Ilara grabbed Nixil's arm, pulling her away from the widening fissures. "We need to get out of here," she shouted over the deafening roar of collapsing terrain. Nixil resisted, her expression torn between fear and resolve. "No. If we leave now, Zelora will be lost forever. I have to stabilize the veins." "You'll die if you try," Ilara snapped, her grip tightening. "You're already pushing your limits. You can't take on something like this alone." Nixil met her gaze, her luminous eyes filled with sorrow and determination. "Then help me," she whispered. "Your blood gave me life, Ilara. Let it give my world life as well." Ilara stared at her, the enormity of what Nixil was asking sinking in. To stabilize the veins would require channeling immense amounts of energy, a process that could easily consume anyone attempting it. And yet, looking into Nixil's eyes, she saw no hesitation, no doubt. Only trust. "Tell me what to do," Ilara said finally, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Nixil nodded, her gratitude shining through even as tears welled up in her eyes. She extended her staff, placing it between them. "Place your hands here," she instructed. "Focus on the bond we share, the connection forged by your sacrifice. Let it guide you." Ilara obeyed, her fingers brushing against Nixil's as they both gripped the staff. A surge of warmth coursed through her, followed by a sensation unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It was as though she could feel the pulse of Zelora itself, its heartbeat resonating within her chest. Images flooded her mind, vast forests teeming with life, rivers shimmering with starlight, skies painted in hues of gold and crimson. This was Nixil's world, her home. And now, somehow, it was also Ilara's. Together, they channeled their combined energies into the staff, directing it toward the ruptured veins. The effort was excruciating, every fiber of Ilara's being screaming in protest. But she held on, drawing strength from Nixil's unwavering resolve. Slowly, agonizingly, The cracks began to seal, the chaotic energy stabilizing. The trembling subsided, replaced by a profound stillness. When it was over, Zelora collapsed to her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion. Nixil knelt beside her, her own strength nearly spent. For several long moments, they simply sat there, breathing heavily, the silence broken only by the gentle hum of restored energy coursing through the land. "We did it," Nixil murmured, her voice barely audible. "You saved us, all of us." Zelora managed a weak smile, though her thoughts were clouded with uncertainty. The battle may have been won, but the scars it left behind ran deep. The Zeloran people had suffered unimaginable losses, and the road to recovery would be long and arduous. And then there was the question of what lay ahead for her and Nixil. Their bond had grown stronger than ever, but the future remained uncertain. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting the ravaged landscape in soft golden light, Zelora found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had come to Zelora as a warrior, driven by duty and a desire to protect. But she was leaving, assuming she survived, as something more. She had become part of something greater, connected not just to Nixil, but to an entire world. And yet, as she looked at Nixil, who gazed back at her with a mixture of love and gratitude, Zelora knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the remnants of smoke and ash, bathing the scarred landscape in a warm, golden glow, Zelora and Nixil stood side by side amidst the ruins of what had once been a thriving civilization. The air was heavy with the scent of scorched earth and the faint hum of restored energy coursing through the celestial veins. Though battered and weary, there was an undeniable sense of triumph, a fragile but palpable hope that Zelora might rise again from the ashes. Nixil turned to Zelora, her luminous eyes shimmering not just with exhaustion but with something deeper: gratitude, admiration, and perhaps even love. She reached out, her delicate fingers brushing against Zelora's hand. "You have given me everything," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your strength, your courage, your very essence. I owe you more than words can express." Zelora shook her head, her lips curling into a faint smile despite the weight of all they had endured. "You don't owe me anything," she replied, her tone firm yet gentle. "This wasn't about repayment or sacrifice. It was about doing what was right. For you, for your people, for this world. And, maybe, for myself too." Her admission hung in the air between them, unspoken truths lingering like the morning mist. Over the course of their shared struggle, something profound had blossomed between them, a bond forged in blood, fire, and mutual respect. It transcended species, culture, and even language, rooted in the simple act of choosing to stand together when all seemed lost. But now, as the immediate danger faded and reality began to settle in, questions loomed large. What did this bond mean for their futures? Could it endure beyond the battlefield, beyond the urgency of survival? Zelora glanced at Nixil, seeing both the princess she had fought beside and the alien being whose existence was so fundamentally different from her own. Would their connection be enough to bridge those differences? Before either of them could speak further, a soft rustling sound drew their attention. From the shadows of the canyon emerged a small group of Zeloran survivors, their faces gaunt but resolute. They approached cautiously, their eyes wide with awe as they took in the sight of their princess standing tall amidst the devastation. One of them, a young girl no older than 10, stepped forward hesitantly, clutching a tattered cloth doll in her arms. Her voice quavered as she spoke. "Princess Nixil, is it true? Did you save us?" Nixil knelt down, meeting the child's gaze with a warmth that softened the weariness etched into her features. "We saved each other," she said gently, glancing briefly at Zelora before returning her focus to the girl. "And now, we must work together to rebuild what has been broken. This is our home, and it will heal, as will we." The girl nodded solemnly, her tiny hand reaching out to touch Nixil's glowing cheek. In that moment, a spark of hope ignited, not just within the child, but within everyone who witnessed the exchange. For the first time since the invasion, the survivors dared to believe that their world could be reborn. Yet, as the crowd dispersed to begin the painstaking process of reconstruction, Zelora felt a pang of unease. She watched Nixil move among her people, offering comfort and guidance, her presence a beacon of resilience. But Zelora couldn't shake the feeling that her role here was coming to an end. She belonged to another world, another life. As much as she wanted to stay, to see Zelora flourish under Nixil's leadership, she knew she couldn't linger indefinitely. When night fell, blanketing the land in a tapestry of stars, Elara found herself alone on a ridge overlooking the valley. The distant sounds of rebuilding carried on the breeze, mingling with the soft chirping of nocturnal creatures emerging from hiding. She stared up at the twin moons hanging low in the sky, their silvery light casting long shadows across the ground. Her thoughts drifted, untethered, until a familiar voice broke the silence. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Nixil asked, her form materializing beside Elara like a ghost bathed in moonlight. Elara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let out a slow breath, her shoulders sagging under the weight of emotions she couldn't fully articulate. Finally, she nodded. "I have to," she admitted quietly. "My team, my mission, they're waiting for me. And this isn't my world, Nixil. It never was." Nixil lowered her gaze, her silver hair catching the light as she nodded slowly. "I understand," she said, though her voice betrayed the pain behind her acceptance. "You've already given so much. Staying would only ask more of you than anyone has the right to demand." Elara turned to face her, her heart aching at the sadness in Nixil's expression. "It's not about obligation," she said earnestly. "Being here with you, fighting alongside you, it changed me. You changed me. But I can't abandon my responsibilities any more than you can abandon yours. I think part of me needs to go back, to remember where I came from." Nixil looked at her then, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "Then promise me one thing," she said, her voice steady despite the tears glistening on her cheeks. "Promise me that this isn't goodbye forever. That wherever your path takes you, you'll carry a piece of Zelora, and me, with you." Elara reached out, taking Nixil's hands in her own. The warmth of their connection surged between them, a reminder of everything they had shared. "I promise," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And you'll always have a piece of me too. No matter how far apart we are, our bond will remain. That's something no distance can erase." They stood there for a long while, holding on to each other as if afraid to let go. When the first hints of dawn began to lighten the horizon, Elara finally stepped back, her resolve hardening. "Take care of yourself," she said, forcing a smile. "And take care of this world. It deserves nothing less than your brilliance." Nixil returned the smile, though hers was tinged with bittersweet longing. "And you take care of yours," she replied. "Until we meet again, Elara Voss." With one last lingering glance, Elara turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing softly against the rocky terrain. As she disappeared into the distance, Nixil remained on the ridge, watching until the rising sun swallowed her silhouette entirely. Though her heart ached with loss, she felt a quiet certainty blooming within her. Their story wasn't over. It couldn't be. For even as Elara journeyed back to her own world, the bond they had forged would continue to shine brightly, a testament to the power of unity and sacrifice. In the days and months that followed, Zelora began to heal. Under Nixil's guidance, her people rebuilt their cities, replanted their forests, and rekindled the traditions that defined their culture. Stories of the human warrior who had given her blood and her soul to save their princess spread far and wide, becoming legends whispered around campfires and sung in hymns beneath the twin moons. Meanwhile, across the stars, Elara returned to her duties, carrying with her the memory of a luminous princess and a world unlike any other. Her battles continued, her missions varied, but her perspective had shifted irrevocably. She fought not just for humanity, but for the belief that connections could transcend boundaries, that acts of kindness and bravery could ripple outward, touching lives in ways unimaginable. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of the universe, two souls remained linked by an invisible thread, a bond born of sacrifice, strengthened by love, and destined to endure across galaxies and lifetimes.